Hello, fellow coder. Welcome back to the FreshVotes series, where we are building a real-world Java web application from scratch, leveraging new technologies such as Spring Boot and other cool stuff. So in this lesson, we are going to be working on essentially a different view for our products in such a way that we can start to add comments. So there is in the last video, I alluded to this, where we need to be able to discern whether or not we own the product that we're looking at. Because if we don't own it, then we, one, cannot edit it, right? If you don't own it, you can't edit it. Or rather, with the feature requests, I should say, we're leaving comments on feature requests. Apologies, not the product, the feature request. Do we own the feature request? In other words, are we the one who made the feature request? Yes or no? If yes, then we should have the ability to edit certain aspects of it. If we don't own it, then we should be able to leave a comment. And also, if we do own it, we can also leave comments as well. So that's sort of the direction that we need to go. But for this video, we will be starting that process. I doubt we'll be able to get to the finish line of adding comments and whatnot, but we'll see how far we can get. So for the sake of, I'm a very visual person, so let's get the server booted up and let's take a look at what we're dealing with here. So let's go to localhost 8080 and we will log into our dashboard. Well, that's not what I expected. Localhost 8080. Congratulations, you said. Oh, sorry. I started this server down here. This is just a regular Tomcat server that doesn't have anything deployed to it. So it just started a regular Tomcat server with nothing deployed to it. So that's what you get when you do that. I need to right-click on the project and say run as Spring Boot app. Then it will properly launch the Spring Boot app. There we go. I was like, this is weird. I don't remember seeing this. Let's refresh. Now we're in the Spring Boot app. There we go. Okay, so when we log in, we can take a look at the sort of feature request view, right? So this is sort of the view that, we're starting with. Obviously, this is not a very nice and pretty view, but this is a starting point. But this is the view where we should be able to, see the upvotes and downvotes. We should be able to upvote and downvote as well as leave comments. And again, all based on whether or not we own it or don't own it. So this is sort of the view that we are we're going to be working with, right? We're going to be working with this view. So where can we start? Let's see what my brain comes up with. Because again, the whole point of these video series is I don't do much homework. I don't do much prep work at all. What you're seeing is my live thoughts about how I would proceed and how I would solve problems as a programmer. Because programming is more than just code. It's more than just syntax and logic and algorithms. It's about problem solving. It's all very much about problem solving. In fact, that's the number one skill across the board that employers are looking for when it comes to coders. Okay, they prioritize problem solving above everything else, including knowledge of the language that you're being hired or potentially being hired to work with. Okay, so they want you to have better problem solving skills and show that you have better problem solving skills than comprehension of the language that they're hiring you to work with, right? So that's why these videos are the way they are, because you're seeing the problem solving that I'm working with. So, okay. What's the next step? What can we do here? Well, the most obvious thing is, why don't we just show an up and down arrow for upvoting and downvoting? That seems a lot simpler than comments. But that, it doesn't matter which one we implement first. I said we were going to do comments, so let's just do the comments. So the view itself, I think, needs to change, because like I said, this is ugly. Maybe we should, no, I was basing it off of Reddit. So Reddit's view is similar to this, except that sometimes I think you can see the description as well, or at least the start of a description. So that's something we can consider. But anyway, we'll get there when we get there. In terms of comments and being able to leave comments, I think it's still you need to click on the feature itself, right? So since we own this feature request, we are the ones who created it. We have this view where we can edit this feature request. So maybe the first step is, let's create a view where you cannot edit this thing. So in other words, let's give the model the opportunity to know whether or not you own the feature request that you're looking at. So there we go. I think that's a good starting point. So how do we do that? Well, first things first, let me open up my my SQL workbench. Take a sip of my coffee. And let's make sure there's a way to know that we actually own a feature, right? Request. So a feature is tied to a product ID, and a product is tied to a user ID. So actually, now that we look at the data model that we've created, I don't know if we have enough data here to work with to do this properly, right? A person, this is implying that all feature requests belong to the person who owns the product, and that's not how we want to do this. We want to be able to have a feature request be submitted by anyone, not just the owner of the product, right? In fact, the owner of the product is probably the least likely person to create a feature request, although that's not necessarily true. Maybe they want to have feature requests in there to show their future roadmap, right? So that's not entirely true. But anyway, the point is, there's nothing in here that ties a feature to a user, right? Other than the product is tied to a user. So that we actually need to change to our data model. So there you go. This is what happens, right? These are the problems that we encounter as we are solving problems. Anyway, that's just the way things go. So, and I said way back at the beginning of this whole series, when we were first fleshing out the details of this data model, in other words, the database tables and whatnot, I said this is probably not going to be perfect. This is probably going to need to change over time. So being able to nail it perfectly the first time in terms of designing everything, it's very unlikely that you're going to do that. It's very likely that you're going to need to make changes, just like I'm about to right here. So don't be bogged down with thinking it has to be perfect the first time you create the system, right? So anyway, so the feature is tied to a product, right? But the feature should also be tied to a user. And this is where I also say, okay, the feature should be tied to a user, but this is where we think, can the feature be tied to many users or just one, right? So in other words, I'm saying, what kind of relationship is this that we're talking about? Since we are talking about tying a feature in with a non-embedded or not embedded, a non-existing Java data structure. So in other words, a long data structure or a long data type it's built into Java, right? String built into Java, integer built into Java. Like all these are supplied by Java. Product is not built into Java. I created it, right? And because I created it, this is where this concept of a relationship comes from. Okay? That's how we decide when we need relationships. And you can see that in the data types. When you look at these data types, there's no relationship information for the long. There's no relationship information for the string. But when you look at the product, here's a relationship, right? So the entities that we create, if there's a relationship between those entities, that's when we need to map out that relationship. So again, this is just, I'm explaining my mindset and what goes into it. So a feature can be created by a user that could or could not own the product, right? It could be, a random person on the internet can create a feature request. And this is another requirement of, wait, do we have to have a user account to create a feature request? Right? Do I have to be logged in, and do I have to have my own account to actually have the privilege of opening this feature request concept and creating one? Well, I would say for my own design purposes for this product, I would say yes, you would have to create an account. Reason being is I also want to limit the amount of votes that you can make on feature requests, and maybe potentially limit the number of feature requests that you can have open at any given time. Okay, so these are all things that you can only track that stuff, how many upvotes you have, assigned, and how many feature requests you've created and opened if you've logged in. You can only have that information available if you have logged in and if you have a user account. So, having said that, yes, I want to tie a feature to a user. Question is, one user or many users, right? But I think in this case, it's just one. So one feature can be tied back to one and only one user. But one user can have many feature requests. Okay? So that is a one-to-many relationship. right? One-to-many is from parent to child is one-to-many. So from user to feature request is one-to-many. But from feature requests to user is one-to-one. And that, by definition, is a one-to-many relationship, right? Because the other way is many to one. And that's exactly what we have here. The user here is a many to one relationship. So we are going to bring in our getters and setters for our user. I just did Alt-Shift-S and then R to generate that. So let me I'll show you again before, without doing the short keys. I'll right-click and say source, and then generate getters and setters. Okay, but you can see Alt-Shift-S is for source here, and then getters and setters, you can barely see it. Well, you can't at all right now, but you click R. The R key is the shortcut key to generate getters and setters. And then I click on the checkbox to say I want to generate the getter and setter for the user object, and then poof, there we go. We have getters and setters for the user object, and since this is a many-to-one, I can just copy-paste the many-to-one here. And there we go. Now, that's only one side of the equation. We also need to do the other side, which is the user side. So the user has one-to-many relationship to, not products, but feature requests, right? So we have private set feature features equals new hash set comme ça. Or like this. Sorry, that's my French coming out. And then because, again, this is a non-built-in Java thing, this is an object that I created myself, we have to define a relationship just like we have for these two other guys, for products and authorities. So we do Alt-Shift-S-R to generate getters and setters for the features hash set, and we define it as a one-to-many relationship. Cascade. Do we want to cascade delete all the feature requests when a user gets deleted? No. I do not. And I know that because if someone deletes their user account and they've created a feature request, let's say I go in and request a feature from some product that I'm not the owner of. Let's say, I don't know, Google. I'm leaving a feature request for Google. I want it to, do something different. I go and do that. Other people see my feature request and say, hey, that's cool. I'm going to upvote that. Or, hey, that's cool. I have questions about it. Or I want to expand on what this Trevor guy has suggested. And they go and they leave comments to expand on it and feedback, etc., etc. And then I go and I delete my user account and then it deletes the feature request? No, we don't want that to happen. That would be bad because other people have potentially have skin in the game, right? They are expecting that feature request to be seen by Google or whatever company that we're making the suggestion to. So that would be bad if when we deleted the user account, the feature request gets deleted too. That would be bad. So cascade type should just be persist, in my opinion. Fetch, we can make it lazy. Typically, lazy is the way to go, and mapped by, I think it's user, right? Because on the feature side, the variable that we called to refer to the user relationship is just user. That's why we have user here. And we chose lazy mapping because that's more efficient in terms of querying. We don't always want to pull in every single feature request for a particular user when we are working with a user that we've loaded from the database. We don't always want to load the features that particular user has potentially requested or created, right? We only want the features when we want them. So that'll come down the road. So that's called lazy fetch type. Not just the queries that get generated automatically will be a lot more, will be faster. It'll be a lot more efficient. Okay, so we've got that set up. So we've created that new relationship. The server has rebooted. I assume that means it should probably have modified my feature table. So if I right click and say refresh, boom, now we have a user ID that just appeared there. Okay, cool. So now that we've done that, the situation that we find ourselves in is we need to make sure that all the existing functionality for when we save a new feature, the existing functionality for saving a new feature now has to populate the user field so that we populate our database correctly, right? Because it's a new field that we've just added. So any existing functionality needs to be updated. So where is this existing functionality? Well, it's probably in the feature controller, right? So what in the feature controller modifies a feature? Well, there's right here, post mapping for creating a feature. So when we create a feature, we know what value we want to populate, right? We want to populate the value of the current user, so the logged in user. So we can bring in the authentication principal, user, into our method, Okay, and that will allow us to populate the user when we create the feature, right? So we say create feature, but we probably need to pass in this user into this method for creating a feature. I'm gonna do Control-Shift-G to do a search to see if anything else other than this method calls this create feature method, and I see in my search there's only one place it gets called. So Control-Shift-G does a search. I forget which search. Control-Shift-G, can I see that anywhere here? I don't even know, like, is there a way, I don't know how to quickly see, surround with, local history, references, probably references. Yeah, workspace references, Control-Shift-G. So that's what the shortcut key does. It says, hey, check the workspace to see if there's any reference to this method. It's a very helpful search. But since there's only one, I'm going to change this method signature to include the user. And to do this automatically, I can refactor. So I can right-click and say refactor, and I can say change method signature. So Alt-Shift-C is the shortcut key. Changing the method signature, which means instead of just having a product ID that it takes in, it should also take in a user object. Okay, and the default value we'll have is just user because we know it's called user because that's what we know we have already. So we'll say okay. User cannot be resolved to a type. Okay. Probably inside of the create feature, it can't resolve that to a type. Yeah, so I need to, so it created the user here, but I need to import the com.freshvotes.domain, and there you go. So now we've pulled in the user inside of the create feature, inside of the feature service. So now here, we're going to take this user and set it onto our feature because we're creating a brand new feature, right? So, okay, if the product is present, then so this is the only situation where we save the feature request. So here we can say feature.set user to be user, and user.getFeatures.add feature. Okay, that's sort of the same thing that we did up here. Feature set product get features add feature, same thing. So it's parent sets the child sets the parent. I should say parent adds the child because there's multiple, because it's one-to-many, and then child sets the parent. Okay? Now there's only one potential flaw I see in this code. It's that whether or not the user is populated with everything that it should be populated with, because I'm not loading it from the database, I'm loading it from the Spring security context. We'll see if that works properly. So that's the create feature, and then we also need to do the same for any other stuff that modifies a feature. So feature service.save here. This is the post mapping for updating a feature. Okay, so same concept here. We should probably bring in the authentication principal, user, and we're gonna have to change this save. Well, we don't actually have to change the save. We can say feature.set user to be user. Yeah, I think that's safe. Yeah, because we already have a feature. It should not be null because we're updating an existing feature, and we're just setting the user onto it. That should be okay. Famous last words, but there we go. So now this update feature, now that we have this in here, let me reboot the server again just to make sure it rebooted properly. Now we have a couple of feature requests that we need to resave, because if I go and say select star from feature, we're going to have a few feature requests, quite a few, with no user IDs assigned to any of them. And right now, in this situation, this is not a good situation. This is bad data, right? So I can either run a database script to manually populate the user IDs for all the ones that I have here, or I can go in and test this by logging in and doing it through the UI. Okay, because we just changed the update functionality, the save functionality. So now if I click on one and say save, it may have populated the user ID, right? So let's go back to our database and refresh, and there we go. You see user ID 1. So that's a good way to test to make sure that our functionality is working. So I can click on every one and say save. So I've saved 3, and now, interesting, only 2 have been updated. So why did that happen? Interesting. Let's go back and go to the other one and save this guy. Okay, so now 3 are updated. So that's interesting. That one of the 3 in here didn't save properly. So another request. Let's make it better. Let's make it better did not save properly. Let's make it better. Save. Now it worked. That was odd. Maybe I went too quick or something. That's interesting. Anyway, and then we have these 2 feature requests here that are completely empty. I think this is just bad data from when we first started to create the application. These are sort of, you know, we can't see these because they don't have a title. So there's 2 things I can do here. I can just probably delete this data because it's bad data. Or I can assign a title and then they'll show up on the front end. But I'd rather just delete. So I'll run a script. I'll say delete from feature where ID is in a list of IDs. So I'll add 1, 2 because that's ID 1 and ID 2 are the ones that are bad. And I will run this delete statement. There we go. Now they're gone. Select star. Boom. So now all of the feature requests that we have in our database have the correct data. They're all assigned to the user ID 1. We have tested our logic for the saving. That works. Or rather the updating, and that works. Now let me go and create a new feature request, maybe on product number 2. Let me create a new one. Feature request number 2. This is the second feature request for this product. So now I'm testing creating a brand new feature request. Actually, I just did it. When I clicked on create a new one, it should have created it in the database, and it should have assigned a user ID to it. So before I click the save button here, because we know the save button should work, we just tested that. Let's do a select star from feature. It should add feature ID 7 and hopefully have a user ID of 1. Let's see. There you go. Feature ID 7, user ID 1. Fantastic. And then if I say save, it should keep that 1 in there and just update the rest of the stuff. Fantastic. Okay, so there we go. That's our step 1 was we needed to change the data model. So really, like I said, we're nowhere near creating comments or being able to create comments just yet. We'll probably need a few videos until we can get that completed, but that is the process that we go through. You see the problem solving that I used to figure out that, hold on a second, in order to do this whole thing of, do I or do I not own this product? So therefore, should I or should I not see or have the ability to change the description of the title? I couldn't do that before. I didn't know what user created this feature request, right? So now I have that ability. So now we can go forward in the next video and change this so that if we don't, we are not the creators of the feature request, we'll make it so that we cannot edit the title or the description. Okay, and then the next step is, let's add the ability to add comments. Cool. All right, thanks so much. If you enjoyed this video and you're watching on YouTube, please feel free to subscribe, click the like button, all that stuff. If not, hey, why aren't you following me on the YouTube channel? Check it out. Cool, Coders Campus, FreshVotes series. Go ahead, Google it or YouTube it. And if you're not watching on YouTube, then, if there's a way to, leave a comment or review, whatever you like, go ahead and do that. Who knows where else I'll be publishing these videos. So I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. As always, take care of yourself. Happy learning, and bye for now.